All right, one-page rules. I apologize, it took a little while to get this next part out. We're going to try and go through all the basics to it. There's an advanced set of rules, but they have that behind their Patreon, so I'm going to respect that. We're not going to mess with that, at least not at this time. When we get to our actual battle reps in the future, if one of the advanced rules comes up, I'll explain it. But for today, we're going to go over 2 of the 15 pages, keeping in mind that the first page is lore and background, the second page is mostly just index. So we're going to be starting right here at general principles. Most important thing is to have fun. Now, this is, it seems like a super basic thing, but you would be shocked how many people lose sight of this in an effort to win a game. Remember to have fun. You're playing with many toys representing soldiers and monsters of all fashions. It's supposed to be fun. They have obviously got models that come in different scales because they're coming from different systems. The general rule is just use whatever base that model comes with, and the one-page system tends to just work with whatever the modeler wanted. Now, they made it like this on purpose because they want to make sure that if you're running Games Workshop, if you're running Manic, if you're running Infinity, you can just use what they come with. You don't have to worry about it too much, but it does give you some options for, like, here's probably your height and width. It comes up a little bit when we start getting into the more advanced ways to do line of sight, but again, that's a future me problem. Now, units, stats, name, quality, defense, equipment, special rules, cost, that's all in the army builder. If you don't want to bog yourself down too much with trying to memorize all this, it's all in the army builder. It's going to have definitions and references every time you print your army out. It's going to have all the stuff you need. There is the one page per its name that has the universal special rules that most units use and that affect things, and you're going to have that with you when you play. It's going to be, you don't need to worry too much. Quality is for attack and morale, defense is for defense, equipment is what they have and also what their options to buy in the army builder are, special rules, anything that's unique to that unit obviously, and how much they cost in the army builder to put your army together. You obviously are going to be doing your D6 as we mentioned. D3 is you take a D6 and you have it. 2D6 is roll to and add them. D6 plus 1, that's just as an example. You roll D6, you add 1 to it. Same with minuses. You can only ever reroll a dice one time, and whatever the second one is, that's what you get. It may seem like you shouldn't have to say this, but you do. Not only do you need to say this, you need that rule to be in place, and you need it to be written that way, because if you don't, you're going to run into, like, the lawyers of the wargaming community who are adamant about making sure every army functions to its absolute potential. If that means bending a rule but not breaking it, just trust me, you're better off with it this way. Now, roll offs, obviously, I roll and you roll. Whoever gets higher. We tie, do it again. Quality test. Now that just means that in that situation, you're going to roll your D6. You're going to compare it to what the quality stat is. It's usually going to be something like 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus. If your die roll is equal to or exceeds that number, you have succeeded. If your die roll is less than that number, you have failed. Simple stuff. It's great to get a foundational understanding, but it does not need to be more complicated than this. So next up we have this. This is obviously page 5. This is a little bit more complicated, and we need to spend just a little extra time here. Because you just kind of have to. It's just the way that this kind of stuff is. So your weapons are going to have the name of the weapon, the range, the number of attacks, and the special rules. What this means is what the weapon is called, what its range is. If it doesn't have a range, it's a melee weapon. It's going to say A and a number between 1 and whatever. That is how many dice you're going to roll with that weapon when you attack with it. So with this example, they gave us heavy rifles, 24-inch range, 1 attack, A1. So you're going to roll 1 dice. If it meets or beats your quality score, bam, you hit. You're good. Move on. The next after that A1 is the special rules that apply to this weapon when it's fired and used. In this example, they have AP and they have 1 inside of brackets. Now, AP is a special rule that represents your armor piercing, your ability to bypass a defense save. 1 means you make the save 1 worse. A lot of people get hung up on this. So there's there's two schools of thought. There's the one I like, which is if you have a 3-up save, it now becomes a 4-up save. So now you need 4, 5, or 6. The other school of thought is to subtract 1 for each AP, but I think that ends up being more confusing than helpful. Remember that 6s always pass, 1s always fail. So if you've got something that's adding 1 to your save, you can either think of it as negating the AP, which is fine, or you can do what I tend to do just to keep myself straight. If you have an AP of 1, your 3-up becomes a 4-up. Then you have a cover bonus, so it adds 1, so your 3-up becomes a 3-up again. And just that'll keep you straight. And just kind of go through any rules that affect this particular scenario. You'll be fine. So when you're measuring distance, and there's a couple different ways different systems do this, and the one page uses the way that I prefer because I really dislike the other way. If you pick a point on that base, measure from that point your full distance, 6, 12, or somewhere in between, 0 and 12. You cannot measure from the front of your rim to the back of your rim. And this is super important because if you don't do it this way, the measurements now have to take into account the size of the bases. This is what Marvel Crisis Protocol does, and it drives me nuts. So if you measure from the head of your model, measure to the head of your model. Make sure the head is not more than 6 inches away if you're doing a 6-inch move. It seems like it should make sense, but it's a point of contention constantly. Now, there are things like unit coherency and how close units have to be together. We'll get into those when we get to them. They are a little different in each game, so sometimes you will see them be a little different. That's fine. As you can see in our little diagram here, the Marine down here, or the Battle Brother, is 5 inches away from the nasty truck and 3 inches away from the little Grot Boys. And that's it. That's how you measure it. Front of the rim to front of the rim for distance. 1 point on the model to the same point on the model for movement distances, and makes it much easier. Now, line of sight they have 3 ways to do this. I'm going to recommend you just use basic line of sight. Get down, look at the model, see if you can see them. If any part of the model is covered by cover, they should get a cover save. Unless that model is wide out in the open, you should get a cover save. Now, in Firefight, where you tend to have one model units, it's a little bit finagly sometimes because the interpretation can be a little different. But if you look from the model shooting and then you look from the model being shot, generally you can see that they can see each other. When in doubt, give them the cover save. Just give it to them. It's better to have it than not have it. Just trust me on this one, because it'll come back around when you do it too. Just everybody agree. The other 2 line of sights are called top-down and volumetric. And while yes, they are more accurate, they are also infinitely more complicated. And that is not what I am about right now. So we're not even gonna touch on those. If you want more about those, you'll have to look into it yourself. All the rules are free. Everything I've shown you is free. None of this is a secret. It's good stuff. So that's going to conclude what we're going to do today. And what I'll do next is the next 2 pages, which will cover the next sections of topics. Honestly, though, we're only going to need a couple videos to knock this entire thing out and then get into some more interesting stuff as we look at armies and special rules specifically, maybe even synergies, depending on how well received this is. Thank you for your time. This is the Ninja Bot. This is Dorkness Incorporated. Go out there and be fabulous.